clap at the beginning because it might be rubbish, but it's lovely. It's really lovely to be here, and I'll let you into a secret that I had to look up gallimaufry as well. I was looking for a title for the book, which incidentally I've been writing for nearly 2 years before it became public that Ofsted were going to be looking closely at the curriculum. And I was saying to one of my colleagues who helps me with some of my online work, I said, I just want a word that is the opposite of coherence. And you know, incoherence to coherence is a bit weak. And she said, well, my husband yesterday was doing a crossword puzzle and the word gallimaufry came up. I said, Sharon, I think that's it. Went and looked it up. So that's how it came about. Totally unscientific. Anyway, delighted to be here with you across the 2 days. It's a real treat for me, actually, to have the chance to have ongoing conversations beyond the one this morning. So I'm going to be sharing some of my thoughts on the curriculum. I'm not the last word on the curriculum, it has to be said. Plenty of people are doing great work. I'm just slightly annoyed at some of the commentary that there is in the press and social media, as though the curriculum is a new thing, as though nobody's been doing anything on it like forever. Just potty, really, because there's been plenty of good work going on, but I think it's no bad thing that we go back and just say, is it as tight and as rich and as robust and as meaningful as it might be? So here we go then. We know that Ofsted are talking about the 3 I's, but I actually find it helpful to frame that work, which is just one of the ways that they're conceptualizing their work, around the 3 C's. So this is what I'm going to be covering in the time that I'm with you, this first session. Some of the controversies that have led up to the curriculum being a focus for inspection. The importance of concepts underpinning a rich curriculum, and then some of the conversations around the curriculum at a number of levels. So at a national level, it's the conversation which the inspectorate are having with the sector. And I think that many things can be laid at the door of Ofsted, which are negative, but I do think they need credit for the fact that they put their draft framework out for consultation earlier on this year. And they have taken on board what the feedback from the sector, and my view is that they are listening. And this is the first time it's happened. I mean, in the past, you know, the frameworks just used to land in the email inbox or hard copies on our desks. But at least we all had a sense of what their thinking was. So there's that level of conversation. There's the conversations that are going on in venues like this today. Then back in schools, the leadership conversations, the conversations that are happening at subject and coordinator level and faculty level in secondary. And then, for my money, the most important conversations, and those are the ones that go on in classrooms. I'll be unpicking a bit of those as we go through. But I'm going to start off by just having a think about some of the controversies, some of the reasons why the curriculum has gone up the agenda. So there are a number of reasons why. I've just pulled them together into 3 areas, just for ease of organizing my thoughts. And the first is that in some schools, priorities have become distorted. Now, actually, for quite good reasons. But in order for children to do well in their SATs in primary or to get strong progress 8 in secondary, what's happened in some schools is that the curriculum has been cut back to focus on SATs or exams preparation. So what that's meant is that in some schools, in year 6 and sometimes drifting into year 5, children have had a diet of SATs practice, for instance, in comprehension and inference exercises, in the mistaken belief that that's going to get them better results. So they do need some practice, but more than some practice, it doesn't make any difference. And you keep on giving the children the same practice test, it doesn't make any, they actually go backwards. So for instance, if you look at the reading papers for the Key Stage 2 SATs and the children who didn't do so well in them, it tended to be a lack of vocabulary. So how do we develop children's vocabulary? It's through a broad and balanced curriculum. And so there's some paradoxes there for thinking we're doing the right things, but actually sometimes we're actually not improving outcomes. Then we know about 50% of secondaries have a 3-year Key Stage 4. Again, to make sure that outcomes are as strong as possible. But the issue here is, and it links to entitlement, is that children are entitled to a broad and balanced curriculum to the end of Key Stage 3, which is meant to be 3 years. You can again see why it's happened. It's not a blame game, because GCSE specifications are more demanding, there's more in them, and so you can see why colleagues want to take more time on it. But it then begs the question of what Key Stage 3 is being used for. So there's some questions around what the curriculum is meant to be doing beyond the exam results, important as they are. Then there have been some misconceptions about what the curriculum is. So when Ofsted were doing their research initially and talking to leaders in secondary schools, what they found in some contexts was that colleagues were talking about the timetable or exam specifications rather than the wider rationale for why there is this curriculum in this school. That was less an issue they found in primary, that we're able to talk more about, the curriculum purpose in their schools. But one of the misconceptions that emerged in primary was that around project work and topic work, where there's sometimes been a bit of a muddle. So one example of this, a unit on colour, which is a great theme for art, obviously, for science, probably get some geography, maybe get some literacy out of there, but by the time it landed in history, it was the Black Death. So there's some curricular, lack of rigor, really, in that. If it's important for children to learn about the Black Death, we do it separately. There's no need to shoehorn everything in. And I was talking to some pupils in the last year or so about what they've been learning in RE in year 4, and they told me they'd been learning about the Jewish people. So I said, great, tell me what you've been learning about the Jewish people. And they said, well, we've been learning about the synagogue. And I said, marvelous, tell me what you've learned about the synagogue. They said, we've made one. So I said, great, tell me what you've learned about the Jewish people in the synagogue. And they said, well, it's made out of cardboard. So if we're not careful, we end up with a cardboard curriculum. So the problem here is that it's not respecting the dignity and the integrity of either religious education or the design and technology. It's about being very, very clear about what the purpose is. And then there's been a question of entitlement. So what we found is that some children in the sector who have additional needs, need additional support, they get so many interventions that they're not getting the full richness that they're meant to. So there are questions about how efficiently we can make that work, that they have appropriate support, that they have pre-teaching, have some maybe post-teaching, but actually that they're not taken away too often from the main lessons. I was in another year 4 class about 6 months or so ago, and the children were preparing to do some really interesting writing. You could tell it was going to be interesting because there were great conversations going on. But at the side of the classroom, there was a table with 6 children on it, and what they were doing was cutting out and sticking in what I call a ghetto table. So how are those children ever going to catch up if they were just being given Mickey Mouse things to do? So it's about making sure, they could have coped, it's about making sure they have appropriate support in order to be able to engage as fully as possible in their full entitlement. So what is it that pupils are saying? A big thread of my work is pupil and student voice. If I ran Ofsted, I'd make pupil and student voice the first plank of evidence on which all other information is built. That's why I'm not running Ofsted, obviously. But I mean, I'm a statistic of 1, but my work has shown that 9 times out of 10, what children say, what pupils and students say about provision and experiences in the school bears a very strong correlation to the final judgment. And it's not that they say, oh, it's outstanding here, or it's measures. It's not as crude as that. It's much more subtle. It's 2 things. It's the way they talk about what's happening in classrooms. So if you can give me an example of something that really makes you think in your lessons, things they come up with are really interesting. And then the wider curricular provision. That's one strand. The second strand is how articulate and confident they are in expressing their ideas. The 2 together are very strong together. Anyway, so what they're saying in the work that I've been doing is they'd like more demanding work, please. Children are saying they'd like more demanding work. Across the sector, I think as a whole, we're too inclined to make things too easy for too many of our children, not just those who need additional support. So I'm going to unpack this now with a thought experiment. And the thought experiment is this, because I'm arguing that actually all of us can cope with more demanding work. So the thought experiment goes like this, that in the next few minutes, everyone in this room, including me, we're going to be sitting a test. And so that means it's unseen and it's unprepared for, but we're still going to do it anyway. And then it's going to take about 10 minutes. Then we're going to leave this room and file out and get another cup of tea and coffee. In that time, through the magic of the internet, this unseen, unprepared for test will be marked. And then we're going to file back in rank order according to how we've done in that unseen, unprepared for test. I'm glad you're laughing because it's not actually going to happen. It is a thought experiment. Sometimes people don't actually can do it. So what I suggest you do, can you just take a moment to clock how that makes you feel? There's no right or wrong response, but just in your heads, just think about your response to that. And then when you're ready, would you like to buzz on your tables about your response to that unseen, unprepared for test? And when you're ready, thank you, colleagues. Just before I take any feedback, can I just ask you, why did you stop talking? What happened? It's not a test. Did someone hear what I said? You didn't have to. Did anyone hear what I said? Fascinating. I said, when you're ready. Absolutely fascinating. It went into, you heard it at a subliminal level. I'm making a bit of a point about this because I'm in lots of classrooms where the teacher set up something quite interesting for children to talk about, and then it stopped talking now. But sometimes the pupils and students carry on talking, and the teacher thinks they're being disobedient. But they're not. Their ideas and their words are still coming out through speech, through talk. And I just think it's important we create a form of words that allows those conversations just to finish. And the reason I think this is important, there are two reasons. The first is I believe it's a fundamental human right that every human being has their ideas and their opinions heard by others. And the second reason is I cannot write something well unless I've spoken it. As James Britton said in 1970, writing floats on a sea of talk. Talk is fundamental to bringing all this alive. Anyway, political point over. Would anyone just like to call out about what their response was to that unseen, unprepared for test beyond who does she think she is standing at the front giving us this to do? Anyone like to say?
I didn't believe you, so I wasn't phased about it.
Very sensible. Right, good. Was everyone the same? Or was anyone a bit wobbly?
No, I did believe you, and I was quite anxious.
Right, I'm sorry. I know I'm smiling. I am sorry about that because it can be triggering for some people. Can you just say why you might have felt a bit anxious?
The lack of preparation.
Yeah.
The fact that I might not do very well because I wasn't prepared.
Interesting. The number of people who think we're not going to do very well in this sector, we're all too modest. Yeah, interesting. Was anybody okay with it? Oh, good. That makes the stats work. 1 or 2 people do. That's okay. What I find is, I've done this about 20,000 times. It's totally unscientific. I just add the numbers together. What we find is about 90% of people feel very uncomfortable at the thought of this unseen, unprepared for test, psychologically uncomfortable. Most people are prepared to go along with it until we realize we're going to be ranked. Is that the case for a lot of you? Yeah. So what's happening there is, instead of focusing on the job in hand, my cognitive focus is where I'm going to be in that ranking order. And it's worse when we know people, actually, obviously, if we're surrounded by our colleagues. So I'm actually going to do less well because of the prospect of thinking where I'm going to be. About 10% of people are absolutely fine with it. About 10% of people are fine. But I put it to you, colleagues, that either you or someone you know does something like crossword puzzles, Sudoku, maths puzzles. Do we know people who do that? I know we're too busy in term time. Now, I'm arguing these are a form of test. Now, any metaphor or simile or analogy only pushes so far. They're not literally a test, but I think there's some similarities there. What we're doing is we're putting ourselves under cognitive pressure to do something quite demanding by way of relaxation in our own time. So what's going on here is that we're putting ourselves under this pressure, but the conditions are different from the thought experiment. Now, I do quite a lot of Sudoku because I'm on the train a lot, and what I find is that if I've mastered the easy and the moderate ones, and I'm then tackling the difficult ones, and I go back and try the easy ones, they're not as satisfying when I complete them. And that's what's happening there is we get a rush of dopamine, which is the pleasure hormone, when we achieve something which is quite demanding but still within our reach that we don't get when things are too easy. So this has obviously got implications, not just for us as adults, but for classrooms as well. It links to this notion within the framework, in the quality of education, about ambition. We can be more ambitious. I'm going to be arguing from this. So what I'm arguing is that, and then we've got companies making millions of pounds of profit out of the fact we like testing ourselves, because you go to any newsagents, you go to any supermarkets, there's yards of this stuff. They won't give it shelf space if it's not making money. So what I'm arguing is that we are prepared to do things that are difficult. We're prepared to put ourselves under pressure as long as there's no prospect of anyone making us feel like a Muppet. So I've got to be careful because the Muppets do good work on Sesame Street, but you get my drift. I'm not going to do my best work. I'm not going to talk about my mistakes if there's any danger that I think my colleagues are going to be judgmental towards me. So I'm not going to get support fixing my mistakes, nor are other people going to learn from my mistakes if I keep quiet about them. If I think people are going to think, well, she's not up to the job. I'm not going to share the things that are going right in my practice if I'm worried that my colleagues are going to think, well, who does she think she is? Big head. Anyway, so I'm arguing from this that we are, in fact, a challenge-seeking species, that we like doing things that are difficult as long as the conditions are characterized by high challenge and low threat. And the thought experiment was high challenge and high threat, and I'm arguing that that is deeply dysfunctional. So if we go back to what pupils are saying, they're saying they'd like more demanding work. So I've got a couple of examples now of the children saying this, 2 from secondary, 1 from primary. I was doing a piece of work in a North London school about 18 months or so ago, and as part of that work, I've been asked by the school to talk to some students that they'd identified as being high prior attaining but underachieving, able but idle. Do you have any of those in your school? No? Oh, lucky you. I know exactly what they look like because I managed to produce a couple myself, so I speak from bitter experience. I can report they've grown out of it now, but drive you nuts as a teacher and as a parent. Anyway, so I just sat down and spoke to these students. So year 9, so about 8 of them, and they happened to be all boys. And I said, look, is there any subject in this school where you're not messing around? Because they weren't learning, but they were stopping others from learning, so that's what I needed to unpick with them. Anyway, in this school, it turned out it was geography. So I said, well, tell me what's going on in geography then that means that you are doing your best work and you're allowing others to thrive as well. And they said, well, our teacher just makes us think really hard, and she gives us interesting, difficult stuff to do. For instance, for homework, they said, she'll give us articles to read from publications like the National Geographic. And what she says to us is, your job for homework is to read this. Now, you're not going to understand it all, but that's all right, because at the start of the next lesson, we're going to talk about what you did understand and what you didn't understand. High challenge, low threat. They were lapping it up. And they went on to say, do you know, she sometimes gives us material from universities, don't you know, thrilled to bits. Anyway, I was in this teacher's classroom later that day, and she had the same high expectations for all students, regardless of their prior attainment. When I checked the results for that school, they were the strongest by a margin, and a very high-performing school, and they were right up there nationally. Now, she didn't give them difficult, demanding work to do to get great results. The great results were a byproduct of doing that, giving them that demanding offer, seeing it as an entitlement. Second example is from primary. This is from Alison Peacock's work of 2015, Assessment for Learning Without Limits. I'm sure you're all aware of that, that book. She's now the CEO of the Chartered College of Teaching. I'm suggesting every school should have at least one person who's a member of the Chartered College, because the work that comes out of it is phenomenal, paid for by the school. I'm very good at spending heads' money, but anyway. So the book in 2015 interviewed pupils as they were going from year 5 into year 6. What they were trying to do was tease out what the children thought of ability tables. But actually, they're talking about provision, which is why I'm using this. But I am going to say a few words about ability. If I ran education, I'd ban the word ability. I think it's fraught with difficulty. All I can talk about with any kind of reliability is prior attainment. What have my pupils and students done up until now? But the minute we start talking about ability and the consequences of that in terms of tables which are set in primary and sets in secondary, then we're putting significant limits on children's learning. If you look at the profiles of the children who are in the bottom tables in primary and the lower sets in secondary, a high proportion of those children have pupil premium funding. Well, what's that about? Because however we determine IQ or intelligence, both highly contested terms, I refuse to believe it's linked to postcode or parental wealth. There are two further concerns, and one is, by and large, those pupils get a diminished diet if they're on the ghetto tables. I'm not talking about every school, I'm talking about some parts of the sector, but I think it is, I just think wherever it's happening, I don't think it's good enough. I think we need to be challenging it. My further concern is that those pupils and students generally have the least experienced and the least qualified adults working with them. Now, this is not to put down the work of TAs, HLTAs, RQTs, NQTs. I do a lot of work with them. I have enormous respect with them. This is something about the system and the sector not thinking this through, that our most vulnerable children have the least with them. Yeah, as a sector, we talk about equity and social justice. And we have this, what I think is a form of apartheid. But anyway, you can tell I feel really strongly about it. Challenge it wherever it goes. So this is what the children said. It's small, and I'm going to read it, but you're going to have these slides circulated at the end. So this is what the children said. The first day the children were back, we asked them what they thought of ability groups. The answers were astounding. The more able loved it. They enjoyed being the bright ones and having special challenges set by the teacher. The middle group were annoyed they didn't get this, the same work and challenges as the other group. They wanted to try harder work, but they'd worked out they'd never be moved up as there were only 6 seats on the top table. The less able were affected the most. They felt dumb, useless. They thought they'd never be allowed challenges, as they usually work with a teaching assistant, and this less able group liked the sound of some of the challenges the top group had, but they knew they would never get the chance. So we're rationing interesting work on what I consider to be flawed notions of what children are capable of. We don't know what children are capable of until they're given difficult, demanding things to do with appropriate support. So I'm going to turn now to some of the cognitive science that supports my argument that we're a challenge-seeking species. We like doing things that are difficult as long as the conditions are right. I'm going to take this quite quickly because the slides will be made available to you. I have to say at this point, colleagues, that I only draw on the evidence that supports my arguments. So I'm always, I'm aware that some of this might be confirmation bias, what I pick up, which is why I'm always open to conversations, debate, and discussions. Because as the great Sir Tim Brighouse says, it's teachers and leaders talking about teaching and learning that shifts things on. There's no one absolute answer to this. I'm going to take this quite quickly, and I'm sure you're aware of some of this work anyway. So first of all, Dan Willingham's work, Why Don't Students Like School? He's written a lot. I've just taken some of the headlines from this. Dan's professor of psychology at the University of Virginia for the last 15 years or so. He and his colleagues have been taking the findings from cognitive science and saying these might have implications for classroom practice. Notice the provisional language. They might have implications. Not this is a three-line whip, we've all got to go and do it. So we make sense of it. So his work has found that human beings are curious. Great, because we're a challenge-seeking species. But thinking is hard work. Yeah, but it's meant to be. It's a bit like physical work. If we've been for a hike or a workout or done some gardening, it's quite hard when we get going. Then we get into the zone of it. When we finish, we feel marvellous, don't we? And I'm arguing it's the same intellectually as well, that learning is likely to be deeper if children are presented with problems to be solved. There's problems in every part of the curriculum. And so what many schools are doing with this insight, they are saying, right, they have an overarching question, a big inquiry question that is essentially a problem. Just on the curiosity, some schools have taken the insight from that and saying, to what extent does our curriculum evoke curiosity in our pupils and our students? A nice way of going through. A lot of work on the working memory as opposed to the long-term memory. Their work has found that the learning is likely to be deeper if the children are taught concepts explicitly, because these make rich connections. For me, this is one of the biggest insights into rethinking the curriculum. It starts making it incredibly efficient when I'm planning, but also it's much more meaningful for children. I've got a few examples later. Their work has also found that learning is likely to be deeper when there are stories, conflicts, and dilemmas. So in the jargon, our brain's privileged story, our brain's privileged story. Now, I'm happy to be challenged on this, colleagues, but I don't think as a sector, in either primary or secondary, we've really taken this on board. The power of stories to transform learning beyond the English, literacy in primary and the English in secondary. I think there are a number of things that are working against it. One is if I read a story to a class, something magical happens, doesn't it? The atmosphere changes, haven't we, when we've read a story to a class? What Claire Seeley calls the collective cuddle. We recognise that, don't we? So because it's so pleasurable, we think it's not work. It doesn't feel like work. What have I done is I've found a great story to read to my class. What I've not done by way of preparation is produce half a dozen differentiated coloured worksheets which are going to widen gaps. So it doesn't feel like work. Anyone coming into my classroom with a tick checklist, oh, doesn't look as though there's anything going on. But there is, it's all internal. So because it's pleasurable and because we tend not to think it is proper work, but the schools that are taking this insight on board are reframing their curriculum through looking at demanding text. I'm going to come on to that in a moment. I just want to share this piece of research with you quickly, though. This is this is a piece of work that's come out of Sussex University earlier in the year, where they found that simply reading challenging, complex novels aloud and at a fast pace in each lesson repositioned poorer readers as good readers, giving them a more engaged, uninterrupted reading experience over a sustained period. So very quickly, what they did, they read aloud 2 novels. They selected novels. There were over 12 weeks. There were year 8s, but there were implications, I think, not just for English, but for other parts of the curriculum and also in primary. The novels they selected in this trial were at least a year above what would normally be a text for year 8, so above their pay grade. That's all they did in the English lessons. All the students made 8.5 months reading progress in 12 weeks. The weaker readers, 16 months progress. So if we need any persuading, You see, what's mostly happening is the interventions atomize things too much. I'm not saying we don't have these interventions, but those children never get a sense of the big journey of where a story is going. Huge amounts happen when we get into a story. So it's all going to, and then the meaning of the material. Why are we learning this? I'm going to take this quickly. Peter Brown's work, he and colleagues in the same field, taking some of the findings from cognitive science to support this idea that stuff should be challenging. It should be effortful, their work has found. If it's too easy, the learning doesn't go in. They need to encounter stuff more than once. And so that's why lots of schools, I'm sure some of you are as well, are experimenting with the interleaving of different but related topics. So if I'm teaching about democracy in Key Stage 2 history in ancient Greece, and then we're learning about Magna Carta later on, I'm going to make sure that the thread is democracy, so children comparing and contrasting what might be similar and what might be different. It's that kind of thing that takes learning deeper. A really nice experiment here, randomized controlled trial in the States, showing about interleaving. This was a maths experiment. This is not teachers working harder. It's about thinking about the planning. Because mostly we teach something, and then it's done. And then we teach another thing, and it's done. But when it is interleaved, as they found with this, which it means drawing back on earlier material, quick quizzes and that sort of thing, you can see there the difference it makes when children are tested in terms of stuff going into the long-term memory. Their works also found that regular tests support things going into the long-term memory. But they mustn't be the kind of thought experiment that we started with. They've got to be low-stakes testing in order to go into the long-term memory. There was a conversation about this last summer, and Dylan William chipped in, Saint Dylan, and he said, at the moment, the greatest impact, the largest effect sizes appear to be when students and pupils have a small number of items they're tested on. They mark them themselves, and the results are private to them. That appears to have the greatest impact. I was talking about this at a large multi-academy trust a while ago, and one of the senior leaders said to me, "Mary, where does this sit on a spreadsheet?" To which my response was, most things don't need to go on a spreadsheet, and certainly not this. This is testing for learning. Paradox of forgetting, highlighting, rereading are a waste of time, particularly for secondary courses. I would develop that if I got more time. A great resource that pulls this thinking together, the learning scientists, there'll be the link sent over. Doug Lemov's work. Actually, Doug is a classic example where I only choose the bits I agree with. I admire him very much as an educator. I just don't agree with everything he does. I just take the bits I do. There should be no opt-out. Standards go up when there's no opt-out in classrooms. I need to have created the psychological energy in my classroom that I can call on anyone at any time for a response. And it won't matter if they don't know, because I'll just come to someone else. I obviously won't call on the child whose grandma died the other day. You know, I'm tough, but I'm not mean. No half answers. Children speaking in full sentences using the correct grammar and subject-specific vocabulary. In a school that has really nailed this is School 21. I'm sure some of you are aware of Voice 21's work. So their curriculum is about head, heart, and hand. The intellect, the sense that we all want to be engaged in something worthwhile, community work, locally and globally, beautiful stuff that we create. It's all mediated through talk. Stunning results, that's not why they do it. They do it because it's the right thing to do. Storytelling school, philosophy for children, 3 to 19, stunning results. In year 3, every child gives a 4-minute speech without notes to an invited audience. That's how important they think it is, supported to get there. They believe that oracy is one of the biggest indicators of a child's success in life. Stretching the answers, beginning with the end, no cheap praise and mistakes are good. And then finally for this bit, Ron Berger's work. I'm sure a lot of you are aware of Austin's butterfly. Have we seen Austin's butterfly? Yeah, a number of you have. So it's normally used as a video to show how to set up peer feedback to improve a child's work. But I'm using this in relation to the idea of challenge and ambition. So Austin is about 6. That's his first attempt at drawing a swallowtail butterfly. To my shame, I'd have signed that off. It's not bad for a 6-year-old. When he was capable of this. We know it's not a piece of artwork. We know it's a scientific drawing of a swallowtail butterfly. However, when I've talked to my primary colleagues about that they said, Mary, don't beat yourself up. It's not because you're secondary trained and you've got no idea of standards in primary. They say, we probably would have done the same as well. What they then go on and say is, in the time available, we'd have done 5 more animals of the same quality. And for me, this is a metaphor for the curriculum where the curse of content coverage means that we sacrifice taking children to a place where they develop deep intellectual architecture of what a fine piece of work looks like. So I've got some difficult decisions to make in relation to the curriculum. If it's going to be really ambitious, and children are going to go in deep, what am I not going to do is the question. It's not easy. But I'm arguing it's better to do fewer things in greater depth than to try to cover everything, because we're never going to teach anything everything. So let's do whatever we do in real quality. So I'm arguing from this that we need to be planning for ambition based primarily on what children are saying, but then there's some cognitive science to back it up. Oh, by the way, it's in the, they talk a lot about ambition in the latest framework. I would say at this point, colleagues, we're not running our schools for Ofsted, we're running them for our children. So we don't try and second guess what some random stranger is going to be looking for when they come into my school. They shouldn't be looking for anything beyond safeguarding. They should be looking at what schools are doing. So there's no tick list, but I think it's quite interesting they're talking about ambition. So I'm just going to turn now, colleagues, to how we knit some of this together in terms of the inspection focus, in terms of the intent for the school. It doesn't need truckloads of documents to prove you're doing this. It's about the conversations that go on. It might be written down, it might not. But if we think about the school, first of all, why have we got this curriculum in this school? The form of words we use to describe it, it makes sense if there's some kind of link, even if not the exact words, with the big vision we have for our school. It would be a pity if there was some kind of dissonance. Then we need to be asking ourselves the questions, what might the children who are coming to this school, what might be missing, what might they need? So, for instance, we might have identified that some children are coming to schools with low levels of literacy and oracy, which, by the way, are not just our children from poorer backgrounds, many of whom are absolutely fine. We've got plenty of middle-class kids where no one talks to them. But anyway, if we've identified that, how might we address that in our curriculum? We can't do anything about children's home life. But the minute they're in my classroom, the minute they're in my school, if I've identified this as an issue, how am I going to make sure that this is a school that loves words, that cherishes language, that offers children the beauties and the bounties of literature? You know, I'm going to be dead serious about that. Some schools have identified that the children come from quite narrow-minded backgrounds, quite monocultural, not very tolerant of difference. So they're thinking about how they address that in their curriculum, because, you know, can't come to inner city Birmingham or London to ship children out to, you know, somewhere that might only have a narrow profile. So they're drawing resources like the Lifter resources, world-class documentaries supported by the British Council, stunning, absolutely gripping documentaries suitable for primary and secondary that just open up the conversations, could be used in literacy, PSHE, I'll send the link to the website. But it's just this point, there are other things as well, just this point about what might be missing, what might we include in the curriculum that's going to break some of this open. And then what can the locality offer? And you've got great things going on in Birmingham, and you've got big ambitious plans beyond education. Might those be drawn into some of what's happening in classrooms? So, for instance, are we tapping into the local universities, the place of higher education? You know, there are some schools that have links where professors and undergraduates come in and share what they're doing, and children go there. Some of it's through Skype link. At a more prosaic level, virtually everywhere has got a place of worship nearby. Now, obviously, with a background in RE, I'm going to say that's useful for your RE. However, it doesn't have to be. It could be a marvellous focus for a local history project, art and architecture. And certainly a lot of Christian churchyards are great for science because they've never had any fertilizer. So it's just about thinking imaginatively about what is just around us that makes it distinctive. I was doing a piece of work a couple of years or so ago, and I was visiting a couple of schools on the East Coast where there was a short walk to just literally across from the beach. So I said to the leaders in both these schools separately, I said, how do you use the beach in your curriculum? And they said, well, we go there once a year for a picnic. And I said, oh, come on. Couldn't you get some art, some geography, maybe some maths out? Anyway, it's about thinking imaginatively about what's already here. And then instead of thinking of everything as a deficit model, we might think of our parents, what gifts might they have? So there's a school in this city, quite a poor part of the city, some of you may know, in Smethwick, Victoria Park Academy, in Ballot Street. Is anyone there, from there, here? No, I'll carry on anyway. And a high proportion of those children come from backgrounds in India where the children there's been no English spoken at home for 2 or 3 generations. Now, instead of seeing that as a deficit model, and by the way, they get stunning results, instead of seeing that as a deficit model, they're saying, what are some of the gifts that might be in those communities that we could draw on? So they came up with cooking and cuisine. So they had families in to do demonstrations, but on the back of that, the children set up a social enterprise company. So the school's based in Ballot Street, so the name of the social enterprise company is Ballot Street Spice. And you can buy the stuff. So they've sourced all the herbs and the spices, Mrs. Mahal's masala, all the recipes from the grannies and the aunts and their uncles as well. I bumped into the CEO a while ago and I said, oh, Andrew, are you having to financially support this? He said, you must be joking, it makes money. That's not why they do it. But I just think it's this lens through which we look at the world and say, there are gifts everywhere. Okay. Then we turn to the subjects. What's the big picture for the subject? Beyond the exam or the SATs. What's magical about it? What will be taught and why? So those are the questions to be asked. And then I've just got a quick example here from secondary, where in this school they've decided that it's important at Key Stage 3 that children have a grounding in Western literature. So they've gone right back to Aristotle, Plato, Aristophanes and Aeschylus and the others. And they're drawing out the big ideas in there. That's what they've decided, don't have to. But what they've then gone and done, so ethos, pathos, logos, they've taken the notion of hubris, the idea that sometimes human beings, through vanity, greed, and overreach, stretch themselves more than they ought to and sometimes come a cropper. I'm not thinking of any politicians in particular. But we kind of recognize that in life. But it's a big theme in literature. And so they've taken that notion, this is the interleaving bit, they've taken that notion of hubris, the concept, and they've said across the 5 years, there's equivalent work going on in primaries, when we're learning about Ovid's Metamorphoses, Frankenstein, Macbeth, and in Spectacles, Romeo and Juliet, whatever it is, we're drawing through the thread of hubris. So this is going to deepen children's learning, also makes it more efficient. They didn't have to take hubris, they could have taken something else. So it's this kind of linking through the conversations, and it doesn't happen overnight, that starts getting real rigor and challenge for all children. Sadly, I don't have time to do this one, but this is the background to Dickens, but I'm just conscious of time. You will have the examples of those. Similar stuff going on in primary, very quickly. Making sure that we don't dumb down the big concepts, the big ideas expressed, made explicit for all children. Nice example here from Warminster, where the children are learning about Magna Carta, as you can see. Can't remember if it's year 3 or year 4, but the reason I'm pulling this up is Warminster's just down the road from Salisbury Cathedral, and that's where obviously Magna Carta is. It would be a crying shame if they did not do a unit on Magna Carta, which isn't to say schools in Birmingham or York can't do it, but it's about making those authentic links. It'd be a shame the children didn't have it. So a few words now, colleagues, on the implementation as we think about the curriculum. Just some of the elements very quickly: good subject knowledge and support. So leaders need to be thinking about, if teachers in primary are having to develop something from scratch they've not done since GCSEs, how are we going to put the support in place to allow that to happen? How are we going to create the time? So it's about how we think about using staff meetings. We've got to nail marking and feedback. I mean, Dylan Williams says marking is the biggest PR and most expensive PR con in the history of education. Most marking makes absolutely no difference to children's learning. Got to stop it. Feedback makes the difference. If you want to hold people to account, rather than it just being a nice thing to do, I want my leaders to say to me, Mary, how are you going to do this additional work to beef up your subject knowledge? How's it in your performance appraisal? What are you going to do? You're going to read 3 books, write a summary on a side of A4, share what you found, get some stuff going with kids? Yeah, line manager, I'd be very happy with that. Because you're also taking away target grades. Grades are deeply dysfunctional. Numbers tied to performance management, deeply dysfunctional. Not valid or reliable. Deeply unfair. Anyway, I can imagine I'm not very popular for saying that, but we want to move the profession on. We've got to focus on the things that are going to move the profession on. Discussion. I've italicized that. I'm very pleased to see it in the schedule. They don't actually say responsive teaching, but it's that notion that I've taught something to my children. How are they responding to it? How am I adjusting my teaching? Content is remembered in the long term, and the headlines of the research that I just shared with you, that is similar research, and some of that is also being drawn on by Ofsted as far as underpinning their framework in terms of it's pointless. If I've taught something and they've not got it, I might as well have done something else, mightn't I? Assessment used wisely. So this is mostly assessment for learning. The only times they talk about summative assessment, they're talking about the fact that the only questions they're interested in is if schools are collecting it more than 3 times a year, they're going to be asking what they're using it for. Otherwise, it's this live assessment and feedback going on. Text and materials reflect the ambitious intent. Work is appropriately demanding. This thread of ambition and challenge, I'm delighted to see there. Reading is prioritized. Those are my italics again. I italicize the things that I think are really important. And I think we, I've just summarized those. Obviously, you'll know that the implementation bit in the handbook is, framework is longer than that. I've just drawn out the headlines of it. But I think as a sector, we need to be having more conversations about the principles of implementation. I think we need to be asking ourselves, does anything we offer our children, does it privilege thinking over task completion? Is there too many pieces of work when you sit down alongside a child and they've got no idea what they did 2 weeks ago? I was looking at a child's book a few months or so ago, and in English, and I noticed a few weeks before she'd done some work on homophones. I said, oh, great, tell me what you've learnt about homophones. Because I assumed she'd learnt it because a sheet had been downloaded, stuck into her book. She completed it. The teacher had signed it off, smiley face, no doubt had marked some spreadsheet green that she'd got it on some tracker. So I assumed she had. Not a clue. Bright little thing, not a clue. Why? Because the completion of the task took precedence over whether she had really, really discussed it, talked about it, thought about it. Anything offered to children, I'm arguing, I mean, these are my arguments, they're not in the framework. I think they have got the potential, they should have the potential to lead to mastery, where a child can do something on their own terms as a result of what I've taught them. And finally, I think they ought to be beautiful. I don't mean covered in sparkles and butterflies. What I'm talking about is, are they fit for purpose? William Morris said we shouldn't have anything in our homes that's not either useful or beautiful. I think that's quite a useful lens through which to look at the PowerPoints and the materials that are offered children. And we just accumulate more and more, and I just think we could do with pruning them. The second reason for talking about beauty is that Plato said in the Republic 13, that in order for children to learn, they need to play with lovely things. And so he didn't mean play as in mucking about, that deep concentration which we all recognize. And by lovely things, I'm taking that as lovely language, lovely text, lovely artifacts, lovely stuff. So those are the principles of implementation I'm working to. Let's just have a quick look at these. Children are learning about a place of worship at Key Stage 1. And anyway, I don't think that's good enough, that image. Bit stereotypical. Anyway, the children have got to fill in the gaps. But it's all right, it's eco-saving, so we'll use it. Anyway, just below this, someone's written in, Dear Twinkle, I know believe is spelt wrongly, but never mind. I believe there are two mistakes on the sheet. The Qibla is the direction to Makkah, and the Mihrab is the place where the Imam stands to lead the prayer. The Mihrab can also indicate the direction to Makkah. Kind regards, someone who knows. Now, to be fair, they did change it. But before it was changed, this incorrect resource landed in hundreds, if not thousands, of children's classrooms with incorrect information on it. The only good thing about it is because it didn't privilege thinking over task completion, they probably didn't remember. Then they're going to design a mosque. What's that about? That's not RE, it's not art. It's NAF. Then we're going to design our own prayer mat. This is the last one. We're putting ourselves after our misery. Including symbols to represent people or things that are important to you. So I'm a Muslim child, and this lands on my desk. This is deeply insulting. As we know, there's a very small tradition within Islam where it's acceptable to have images of human form. But for the most part, this is blasphemy. This junk is arriving in children's classrooms. And I don't blame the teachers. I don't blame the teachers. Because if I've been up marking till 10 or 11 at night, if I've been putting junk data into the system, of course I'm going to download rubbish like this. You've got to have a reboot. Why would I do that when I knew that there were resources that come from an organization called Museum Without Frontiers, where I could offer the children the real authentic art from museums and galleries around the world, do the same work. But I need my teachers, I need my leaders to say to me, Mary, you go and find some of these. Now, I'm pulling together resources to show people pointers for these. Fabulous things like teaching history with 100 objects. Why would I not use these if I'm teaching about Greek myths or Greek literature, Demeter and Persephone? The real McCoy. And then you've got academics and educationists working together to produce the resources. Why would I download junk when there's this for free? It's about creating the time to create this for free. Just a few things on the story. Demanding text, I've already made that case. An example here in year 7, you can see what Richard Kennett has said. Students are learning about 1066 and the Norman Conquest. They're given extracts from Mark Morris to read. In lessons, they're using Simon Shamer's work. Year 6, Caged Bird by Maya Angelou. Low priority in children, subsequently banging out that great educational term, but we know what we mean. The child's voice singing through this analysis of the caged bird. The concepts, colleagues, I don't have a huge amount of time, but I'm arguing they're holding baskets. They contain hidden gems. When we get into the etymological work of them, I can pick this up tomorrow. Talk, I've already mentioned. We need to be thinking about the curriculum we offer as a story, and that the book should be really the beating heart of a lesson. Those books are there in every part of the curriculum. So it's about finding the time, and I'm pulling together the resources. Because why would I not offer my children these rather than third-rate worksheets coming off the internet? Sources of support. So how do we make this happen? One day at a time. We live this one day at a time. We hold ourselves to account without beating ourselves up. And we make sure we make the time. Impact. Austin can talk about his progress. His teacher can talk about progress. Some random Ofsted inspector should be able to talk about progress. If they can't, shouldn't be doing it. We know good work when we see it. Colleagues, I'm going to skip over these because of time, but you've got the gist. I'm going to finish with this, colleagues, an allegory which comes from the Swiss Cottage School in North London, doing groundbreaking work nationally and internationally. The allegory of the guitar. Learner A and Learner B, who volunteered for this, they wanted to become musicians. Learner A was given a 12-page list of outcomes, which were related in some way to playing the guitar. Identifies the colour of a guitar. What's that got to do with playing it? But never mind. It's on the list, so we tick it off. You can see the others. And the teacher would show how well he was progressing by using the tick list. He's now reaching higher levels. Visitor comes in and asks him to play the guitar, promptly told by everyone it's something he's never done before. But the teacher reassures the visitor that he's now working at a higher level because he's met all the objectives on the tick list. So he asked them the first question, which was ticked some time ago, what colour's your guitar, my friend? He wasn't able to answer. Meanwhile, with teacher B, learning intention was, I will perform in front of a live audience. First time, it was slow. Over several years, he joins in. Each term, his learning intention is adjusted to enable greater mastery. And after several years, a visitor walks into the classroom and hears him rehearsing his own guitar composition, making only a few technical errors. Isn't this beautiful? He smiled and turned to teacher B, music to my ears. So colleagues, I put it to you that our work for today is to find the music and offer it to our children. Thank you.